The gilded cage, which once felt like a sanctuary, began to feel like a prison. The transition was insidious, a slow, suffocating creep rather than a sudden slam of a cell door. In the first few weeks of our secret marriage, there were fleeting moments, brief glimpses of the Troy I thought I knew, the man who had promised me the world. He was still attentive, still charming, but a subtle undercurrent of something else began to surface. Little remarks, seemingly innocent at first, started to chip away at my confidence. "You know, Leia, that outfit doesn't really flatter you," or "Are you sure you want to spend time with them? They don't really understand our special bond." He had been my sole confidant, my only solace, and now he began to weaponize that dependence. He didn't just discourage contact with the few remaining acquaintances who hadn't condemned me. He actively made it impossible. Calls went unanswered, messages unreturned, often because he had accidentally deleted them or forgotten to tell me. He painted the outside world as hostile, judgmental, and unworthy of my time, reinforcing the idea that only he truly cared for me. "It's just us against the world, Leia," he'd say, pulling me closer. His words a comforting balm that simultaneously tightened the invisible chains around my wrists. Our financial situation quickly became another arena for his control. He managed everything, claiming it was to protect me from the stress, to ensure our future. Soon, I had no access to money of my own, no independence in purchasing even the smallest necessities. Every expense, every desire had to be approved by him, scrutinized, and often denied with a dismissive wave of his hand. "Do you really need that, Leia? We have more important things to save for." My voice, once vibrant and opinionated, grew softer, more hesitant. I started to question my own needs, my own desires, internalizing his judgment until it became my own. The man who had once made me feel more important than my own mother, now subtly, then overtly, diminished my worth. His criticisms escalated from my appearance and choices to my intelligence, my character, my very being. "You're so sensitive, Leia, can't you take a joke?" He'd sneer after a particularly cutting remark. Or, "Why can't you ever do anything right? It's simple, Leia, even a child could understand it." He would twist my words, deny things he had said moments before, making me doubt my memory, my sanity, my very perception of reality. This insidious tactic, known as gaslighting, slowly but surely eroded my confidence, leaving me adrift in a sea of self-doubt. I started to believe his narrative, that I was flawed, incompetent, and utterly dependent on him for guidance and approval. The emotional abuse became a constant companion. His moods were unpredictable, swinging from charming tenderness to cold, cutting disdain in an instant. I walked on eggshells, constantly trying to anticipate his next shift to avoid triggering his anger. I stopped expressing my opinions, my feelings, my desires, because they were always met with ridicule or dismissed as irrational. The vibrant, hopeful girl who had once dreamed of a life filled with purpose and connection withered under the relentless onslaught of his control. I became a shadow, a muted reflection of the person I once was, my eyes losing their sparkle, my laughter becoming a rare and strange sound. I was alone, truly alone. The societal condemnation had cut me off from my friends and extended family, and my mother, the one person who might have seen through his facade, was a gaping wound in my past, a bridge I had burned with my own betrayal. Troy had isolated me so completely that he was my only source of information, my only mirror, my only judge. His words became my truth, his opinions my reality. I lost my sense of self, my identity dissolving into the role he had assigned me, the dutiful, submissive wife who existed only to serve his needs and desires. The days blurred into a monotonous cycle of fear, anxiety, and a crushing sense of worthlessness. I remembered the fierce independence I had once possessed, the dreams I had harbored, the girl who believed she was strong and capable. Where had she gone? Was she ever real? Troy had convinced me that my past self was naive, foolish, and that his love was the only true path, the only way I could ever be complete. He had taken my strength and replaced it with a hollow dependency, my joy with a pervasive sadness, and my self-worth with annoying emptiness. There were moments, fleeting and terrifying, when a spark of my old self would flicker. A sudden clarity would cut through the fog of manipulation, showing me the stark reality of my situation. I would catch a glimpse of my reflection in a window, a pale, haunted face, eyes filled with an unshed sorrow, and barely recognize the stranger staring back. This wasn't love. This wasn't the passionate, all-consuming bond he had promised. This was captivity. This was a slow, deliberate dismantling of my spirit. One evening, after another particularly vicious verbal attack, after he had belittled my intelligence and questioned my loyalty, I found myself curled in a ball on the bathroom floor. The cold tiles, a stark contrast to the burning shame in my heart. He had stormed out, leaving me trembling, tears streaming silently down my face. My mind, usually clouded with self-blame and confusion, suddenly cleared with an excruciating, undeniable truth. His love was not love at all. It was possession. It was control. It was a twisted desire to dominate and diminish, to ensure I would never leave, never find happiness beyond his grasp. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. The man I had sacrificed everything for, the man I had betrayed my own mother for, was not my savior but my captor. The intense attention, the declarations of unique understanding, the insistence that we were us against the world, it had all been a carefully constructed trap. He hadn't loved me. He had groomed me, isolated me, and then systematically broken me down. Every word of adoration, every grand gesture, was a link in the chain that bound me. In that moment of absolute despair and shattering clarity, something shifted within me. A tiny, almost imperceptible ember of my former self, long buried under layers of abuse and self-doubt, began to glow. It was a spark of defiance, a whisper of a forgotten strength. I couldn't go on like this. I couldn't let him extinguish me completely. My life had become a living hell, a silent scream trapped behind a forced smile. I deserved more. I deserved freedom. The thought of leaving, of somehow escaping, was terrifying. Where would I go? Who would take me in? I had no money, no friends, no family to turn to. The world outside Troy's control seemed vast and menacing, filled with the judgment I had already faced. But the alternative, staying, was a slow, agonizing death of my soul. I pictured my mother's face, the pain I had inflicted upon her, the betrayal that had ripped her world apart. The shame was immense, a heavy cloak I wore constantly. Yet, even through that shame, a desperate hope emerged. Perhaps, just perhaps, there was a way back. A way to reclaim myself, even if it meant facing the wreckage I had created. I knew, with a certainty that pierced through the fear, that I had to leave. I had to break free from this gilded prison before there was nothing left of me to save. The journey would be arduous, fraught with unimaginable challenges, but the alternative was annihilation. I had to try. For the girl I once was, and for the woman I desperately needed to become again. The decision, once made, settled in my bones, cold and resolute. I would escape, I would reclaim my life, and I would begin by running back to the only place that might hold a flicker of hope, however faint, however undeserved. I would go back to her. My mother. They say love is patient, love is kind. They say it doesn't envy, it doesn't boast, it is not proud. But what if the love you knew, the love you fought for, was none of these things? What if it was a meticulously crafted illusion, a gilded cage presented as a sanctuary, designed not to uplift, but to control and ultimately, to destroy? This is my story, the journey of Eleanor, and a truth I learned the hardest way possible. True love sets you free, it never binds you in chains. My life, as I knew it, shattered when I was just 13. My father left, a sudden brutal departure that ripped a hole through the fabric of our small family. My mother, bless her heart, was a shell of herself for months. The vibrant woman I knew, the one who hummed as she cooked and laughed freely, faded into a quiet, weary shadow. I watched her, helpless, as she navigated the grief and the daunting reality of raising me alone. Our home, once filled with warmth, became a silent testament to loss. Then, like a splash of unexpected color in a monochrome world, Troy entered our lives. He was charming, charismatic, with a booming laugh that could fill a room and eyes that crinkled at the corners when he smiled. He met Mother through mutual friends, and slowly, gently, he began to mend the fractured pieces of her spirit. I saw the light return to her eyes, heard her humming again, watched her laughter bloom. I was genuinely happy for her. Troy wasn't just good to my mother, he was good to me too. He'd bring me little gifts, remember details about my day that even my mother sometimes missed, and he'd listen. Really listen. My mother, engrossed in her newfound happiness, often worked long hours to make ends meet. It meant Troy was around a lot, a constant presence, a comforting anchor. He'd help me with my homework, teach me card games, and talk to me about my dreams and fears. He made me feel seen, truly seen, in a way I hadn't felt since my father left. He'd tell me I was intelligent, perceptive, mature beyond my years. He'd say things like, "You're so much like your mother, but with an edge, a deeper understanding of the world." Or, "You and I, Eleanor, we just get each other, don't we?" Those words, those knowing glances, they were like a balm to my teenage insecurities. My mother, while loving, was often preoccupied, and in my adolescent mind, Troy's attention felt more profound, more validating. He made me feel special, uniquely understood, even more important than my own mother, in some subtle, unspoken way. He became the confidant I never knew I needed, a safe harbor where I could share my deepest thoughts without fear of judgment. He subtly began to draw a line, an invisible boundary, between his connection with me and my mother's connection with him. "Your mom wouldn't understand this, Eleanor," he'd whisper. "But I do." And I believed him. I started to believe he saw a part of me that no one else did. The years melted away, and I blossomed into a young woman. On my 18th birthday, the day I officially stepped into adulthood, Troy gave me a small, intricately carved wooden bird. "For my little bird," he'd said, his voice a low murmur, ready to fly but always with a home in my heart. It was a tender, intimate gesture that sent a shiver down my spine. Later that evening, as my mother drifted off to sleep, exhausted from the party preparations, Troy came to my room. He sat on the edge of my bed, his hand gently tracing the lines of my palm. His eyes, usually so warm and jovial, held a new intensity, a depth I hadn't seen before. "Eleanor," he began, his voice barely a whisper, "I can't pretend anymore. I'm in love with you." The words hung in the air, electrifying and terrifying. My mind reeled. This was my mother's partner, the man who had brought joy back into our home. Yet, a part of me, the part he had meticulously groomed over years, felt a thrill, a sense of destiny. Hadn't he always made me feel special? Hadn't he always understood me better than anyone? He spoke of a love that transcended conventional boundaries, a connection too powerful to deny. He painted a picture of a soulmate bond, a cosmic alignment that meant we were simply meant to be. He told me my mother deserved happiness, but we deserved true love, and what we had, he insisted, was true love. I was 18, naive, and starved for the kind of profound connection he offered. I was flattered, intoxicated by the forbidden nature of it all. He was charming, persuasive, and I was utterly convinced he saw my true self. The secret relationship began, a clandestine dance of stolen moments and whispered confessions, each lie a thread woven into a tightening web around my heart. I became a master of deception, my life a carefully constructed facade. Guilt gnawed at me, a constant companion, but Troy's assurances, his declarations of undying love, dulled its sharp edges. He made me believe we were victims of circumstance, star-crossed lovers destined to overcome societal norms. The deception continued for months, a suffocating burden I carried alone. But Troy grew impatient. He said he couldn't live a lie any longer, that it was tearing him apart to pretend to be with my mother when his heart belonged to me. He presented it as a sacrifice, a brave act of love for our future. And I blinded by what I thought was love, believed him. I believed him when he said we deserved happiness, that my mother would eventually understand that our love was worth fighting for, no matter the cost. The day Troy told my mother he was leaving her for me was the day my world and hers irrevocably shattered. I wasn't there, but I heard the echoes of her scream, a primal sound of pain and betrayal that would haunt my nightmares for years to come. The divorce was swift, brutal, and public. My mother, the woman who had nurtured me, who had rebuilt her life with Troy, was left devastated, her trust obliterated, her heart in pieces. She looked at me with eyes that held not just hurt, but a profound, chilling emptiness. The condemnation from society was immediate and crushing. Friends, neighbors, even distant relatives turned their backs. I was branded a home wrecker, a betrayer, a heartless daughter. The whispers followed me everywhere. The judgmental stares pierced through me. I lost everything, my family's respect, my friends, my reputation. But Troy, he was there. He held my hand, told me we were strong, that their judgment didn't matter, that our love was pure. He became my sole confidant, my only solace, my entire world. He convinced me that we were martyrs for love, that their hatred only proved the intensity of our bond. In the face of such overwhelming rejection, I clung to him even tighter. He was my shelter from the storm, the only person who understood the sacrifices I had made, the pain I had endured. We were married quickly, quietly, away from the prying eyes and wagging tongues of our small town. I believed, truly believed, that I had found my soulmate, that this tumultuous beginning was merely a test, and now, finally, our true happiness could begin. I was wrong. So terribly, devastatingly wrong. The man I married was not the man I thought I knew. The man who had charmed me, understood me, and fought for me slowly, insidiously, began to disappear, replaced by a stranger I barely recognized. And the gilded cage, which once felt like a sanctuary, began to feel like a prison. The decision, once made, settled in my bones, cold and resolute. I would escape, I would reclaim my life. And I would begin by running back to the only place that might hold a flicker of hope, however faint, however undeserved. I would go back to her, my mother. The escape itself was a blur of adrenaline and terror. I waited for a day Troy was out of town, a rare occurrence, but one I had meticulously planned for. With trembling hands, I packed a small bag, just a few essentials, a change of clothes, and the tattered remains of my dignity. I knew I couldn't take anything of value. He would track it. I couldn't call anyone. He monitored my phone. It was a silent, desperate flight. I remember the feeling of the cool night air on my face as I slipped out of the house, the click of the gate echoing like a gunshot in my ears. I walked for miles, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs, before I found a bus station. Every shadow seemed to hold his menacing form, every passing car a potential threat. The journey felt endless, each mile a step further from the gilded cage, yet closer to the terrifying unknown. When I finally arrived in my hometown, the familiar streets felt alien. My mother's house, once a beacon of warmth, now loomed like a monument to my betrayal. I stood on her doorstep, the weight of my sins pressing down on me, my knuckles hovering inches from the wood. What would I say? How could I ever explain? The girl who had walked away with such arrogance and cruelty was now a broken woman, begging for solace. It took every ounce of courage I had left to knock. The door opened, and there she was, my mother, older, her eyes holding a weary sadness I had put there. Her expression shifted from surprise to confusion, then to a flicker of something unreadable as she recognized the shattered reflection of her daughter. I collapsed onto her porch, tears streaming down my face, the dam of suppressed emotion finally breaking. "Mom," I choked out, the word tasting like ash and regret. "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." I told her everything. The insidious manipulation, the calculated isolation, the gradual erosion of my self-worth. I confessed to the secret relationship, the lies, the naive belief that Troy truly loved me. the devastating realization that I had been a pawn in his cruel game. I didn't spare myself, recounting my arrogance, my blindness, my utterly unforgivable actions. I laid bare the years of abuse, the constant control, the fear that had become my daily companion. I didn't ask for forgiveness. I didn't feel I deserved it. I simply needed to confess, to release the poison that had festered within me. My mother listened, her face a mask of pain and disbelief. She didn't interrupt, didn't accuse, even though her eyes held the echoes of all the hurt I had caused. When I finished, the silence in the room was deafening, thick with unspoken grief. I braced myself for her anger, her rejection, her righteous condemnation. But instead, she simply walked over to me, knelt down, and pulled me into her arms. It wasn't a warm embrace of immediate forgiveness, but a fierce, protective hold, as if she were shielding me from the world and perhaps from myself. "My poor girl," she whispered, her voice thick with tears. "My poor lost girl." That night marked the beginning of my long, arduous journey back to myself. The first few weeks were a haze of tears, nightmares, and a profound sense of shame. I was a ghost in her house, barely eating, barely sleeping, haunted by Troy's specter. My mother, despite her own wounds, became my silent guardian. She cooked for me, sat with me, and listened without judgment as I slowly, painfully began to process the trauma. She never pressured me, never demanded an apology, but her presence was a constant, gentle reminder that I wasn't alone. It was clear I needed professional help. My mother helped me find a therapist specializing in domestic abuse and trauma. Walking into that therapist's office for the first time was terrifying. It meant confronting the ugliest parts of my past, admitting the depths of my vulnerability, and facing the truth of what I had allowed to happen. But it was also the first step towards true healing. In those sessions, I slowly began to untangle the knots of manipulation, to understand the psychological tactics Troy had employed, and to recognize the patterns of abuse. I learned about gaslighting, love bombing, and the cycle of violence. I started to see that his love was never love at all, but a calculated strategy for control. The healing wasn't linear. There were days I felt like I was drowning, overwhelmed by guilt and regret. Days I wanted to give up, convinced I was beyond redemption. But with my therapist's guidance and my mother's unwavering, quiet support, I persevered. My mother and I had countless difficult conversations. We talked about Troy, about my father, about the cracks in our family that Troy had so skillfully exploited. We revisited the pain I had caused her, and I learned to truly hear her sorrow, not just my own. Gradually, painstakingly, the walls between us began to crumble. Her forgiveness wasn't a sudden declaration, but a gradual unfolding, woven into every shared meal, every late-night conversation, every quiet moment of understanding. It was a profound gift, one I knew I could never fully repay. As I healed, I started to rediscover myself. The girl Troy had systematically dismantled began to re-emerge, stronger, wiser, and more resilient. I enrolled in community college, something I had always wanted to do but had been discouraged from by Troy. I took classes in psychology, eager to understand the human mind, both its capacity for cruelty and its incredible ability to heal. I started exercising again, finding strength in my body, a stark contrast to the weakness I had felt for so long. I learned to set boundaries, not just with others, but with myself. I learned the importance of saying no, of prioritizing my own well-being, and of trusting my own intuition, a sense Troy had deliberately tried to destroy. I also began to understand what healthy love truly meant. It wasn't grand gestures or possessive declarations. It wasn't control or jealousy. True love, I realized, was quiet respect, open communication, unwavering support, and the freedom to be authentically oneself. It was patience, kindness, and a shared journey of growth. It was allowing someone to flourish, not trying to prune them into a shape that suited you. I understood that self-worth wasn't something granted by another person, but an intrinsic value that resided within me, independent of any relationship. My independence, once a terrifying prospect, became my greatest strength. I didn't need a man to define me, to validate me, or to make me whole. I was whole on my own. With my own life slowly but surely rebuilt, a new purpose began to solidify within me. I couldn't stand by and watch other young women fall into the same traps I had. I started volunteering at a local women's shelter, sharing my story, not as a victim, but as a survivor. I spoke to support groups, to college students, to anyone who would listen. My voice, once silenced by fear, became a tool for empowerment. I wanted them to see the red flags I had missed, to understand the subtle manipulations, to recognize that true love never hurts, never diminishes, never controls. I wanted to offer them hope, to show them that escape was possible, and that healing, though difficult, was profoundly worth it. My journey was far from over, but I was no longer lost. I had found my way back to myself, to my mother, and to a life imbued with purpose and genuine connection. The scars remained, a permanent reminder of the battles I had fought, but they no longer define me. Instead, they were a testament to my strength, my resilience, and my capacity for transformation. So, if you are listening to this, and if any part of my story resonates with your own silent struggles, I want you to know this: you are not alone, you are not to blame, and you are strong enough to break free. True love, real love, does not control or harm. It is not possessive or cruel. True love is patience. True love is kindness. It is freedom. It is honesty. It helps you grow. It lifts you up. And it allows you to become the strongest, most authentic version of yourself. It is a gentle hand, not a crushing fist. It is the quiet understanding that you are enough, just as you are. Find that love, first within yourself, and then, perhaps, in the gentle, open hearts of others. Reclaim your voice. Reclaim your worth. Reclaim your life. You deserve nothing less. You deserve everything.